Hey, did you hear me? Hey, don't you walk away from me. Did you hear what I said? Don't you walk away. Oh. Yeah, you better.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am.
I don't understand. Why?
What do you mean? Wait a second, what are we doing? You said cross the line.
You've crossed the line if you're going to quit.
Oh, do it again.
I forgot the liquor stores close at 8.
A hero doesn't care if you're a bunch of scary alcoholic bums. Everybody! Everyone's a hero.
You're fired!
No, I'm not.
Oh, yes you are! So you can take your Pulitzer and your beloved Underwood and your change of underwear and clear out.
Do you work for me?
Hi.
Hey.
So we finished reviewing one film while the credits were rolling.
Yes, so you don't need to worry about that.
So this show's going to go by like nobody's business. I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are
the
Cinemaniacs.
So I think, well, we actually don't have to, we can talk about turkeys and drawers and stuff if you want to, but it's not like a rush case.
If you want to keep your turkey in your drawers,
okay, just leave
that's
my drawers,
up to you.
Leave my drawers out of it. So
I try to.
Okay.
So what he's saying is we are not going to be as breathless and as surfacey in our comments. Well, we'll probably still will be.
Well, yeah.
We're fairly surface
You
individuals.
usually are, so.
I try to be. It's just like, yeah, I thought it was okay. Next up is, so we saw a bunch in the theater.
We did.
And a couple on video. Mm-hmm. And if you would love to begin this august proceeding in October.
We'll get to it. In October. October usually when, am I over here? I don't read. There I am. October is, it's usually windy and depending on where you live. But here in New England, it's getting cool and chilly and everything like that, and you get to thinking about cold weather. Well, there's lots of opportunity to get to be thinking about cold weather apparently in the near future when the world is being controlled by hundreds of thousands of satellites. I think it was thousands, actually. Satellites sitting around who completely control all of our weather. So things should be absolutely perfect, right? Nope, unfortunately, somebody gets a hold of all of the information and starts making these things go kind of berserk. And when that happens, you're probably in for a geostorm.
Now a short intermission, so you'll have time to make your selection before the show begins.
I want to be in an industry where I get paid by the number of particulates I create on screen.
Oh my goodness! Well, Gerard Butler would have been quite wealthy then.
All of these CGI-heavy action movies, disaster movies, it feels to me like, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of particles on screen right now. That blew up and it's a billion pieces.
Right.
And I really don't care.
Well, it was so strange because he goes up, he's this guy Gerard Butler is this scientist. Okay, there's something I gotta buy.
Who looks like he just woke up after a week-long bender.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And strolls into his hearing.
It reminded me, I'll jump to one of my comments, was decades ago, was a movie called Firewall, I think, with Harrison Ford, where Harrison Ford was this computer programmer. I had such trouble throughout the entire movie believing he understood a word that was coming out of his mouth. Because I don't think Harrison Ford's probably the smartest guy in the world. So Gerard Butler is this person, and I love Gerard Butler, but as this person who created this huge global defense weather initiative, and he's the only one who knows how it. I had problems with that. But anyway, real briefly, so he's sent up there to fix something because something went wrong. We find out later on that it's sabotage, but they didn't think that. They thought, oops, something went wrong. So they send him back up there. And something else goes wrong with his jet suit. That's like the second thing. And he destroys like half of the satellite as he's flying around there. So it was just wild. I'll let you continue.
Well, see, when I was watching that, I wondered if you and one or more of your sons were going to question any of the science in this film.
Oh, Walter and I had a real good time.
So it's a space station with tons of people. Think Moonraker. And they pull things out, like they pull in a satellite from outer space, and they're touching it with their bare hands.
Right.
And now I only know science from movies about aliens trying to kill people, but I would think if you freshly pulled something in from outer space, you wouldn't go licking it, And it's more like isn't there some quarantine that should happen?
There is one where they're going
space
out there,
microbes.
When they're going out to get those things, they put on their spacesuits, and just like in 2001, the gravity is created because everything's spinning around. Well, there's a line, I forget exactly what it was, but they open the door, and this woman who is with Gerard Butler says, okay, be careful, because when you step out here, the gravity distance all stops. Like as soon as you step there, poof, gravity's over with. And you got to forget, I was expecting this to be kind of silly and lighthearted, so I saw this last of all the ones that I saw. I didn't expect it to be this silly and kind of, I didn't think it was stupid, and I wasn't bored by it, but it sure was silly. It was sillier than Independence Day. I was thinking maybe it'd be Armageddon. It was sillier than that.
Well, it's basically Armageddon crossed with Day After Tomorrow and what was it, 2012, the movie that was a year about all the disasters. And it exists for there to be a lot of special effects. It exists for explosions and things in space to break into a million pieces and things on Earth to have flooding and falling and all this other stuff. And I just thought it was dumb. I don't like those kind of movies. I never liked Independence Day and all of what followed in the wake of that. And this is just a mashup of those. It felt like a Sci-Fi Channel movie with a bigger budget in terms of how this, and it's not all action. It's a lot of people talking as well.
And strife between Jim Sturgis as Butler's younger brother and family.
So, you know, I've got a beef with Foam-Americans. I love British actors. I love actors of every color of the rainbow actors. But I have a beef when every American movie is filled with people straining to do an American accent because they're from England or Australia. And in this one, it's you know, it's what, a Scottish guy and a British guy pretending to be two brothers, and their accents don't match. And at one point they throw off, well, we were raised in England. And I'm like, okay, at least you say that.
I was waiting for Jim Sturgis to break into song or something.
Now in my head, when they don't quite pronounce something right, I'm like, well, you know, they were raised in England, so the accents aren't perfect. Yeah, I just thought this was dumb. I guess if you like, well, I would say if you like this kind of big, dumb action movie, you might like it, but you do and you didn't.
Well,
so,
I didn't dislike it. I think this will be great fun on video. But I couldn't get, it wasn't in just straight IMAX, and I refused to see it in 3D. I really hate the 3D.
I saw it in 3D, and the 3D made zero impact on me. Like, I didn't even notice it was in 3D.
Right. So it might ultimately, if you think it looks like fun, I think it was fun. It was sort of long, but I was never bored. But it was just really silly and a lot lighter weight than I expected it to be.
Speaking of lightweight.
Yes. Isn't it, though?
What do you say about a serial killer in Norway? Does that lift your spirits? It does not necessarily lift the spirits of Michael Fassbender, who is Agent Detective.
Go ahead, say it.
Harry Hole. Really? I mean, come on. Really? That's his character.
That's his name.
They said it in the movie, and I'm like, really? You're not gonna change that for American audiences? Okay. Well, we'll take seriously a movie with the lead protagonist named Harry Hole. He is on the trail of a serial killer who, with every kill, leaves in his presence and/or wake the snowman.
Stand will remain open after the feature begins, so you still have time to add to the fun of watching the movie.
Ooh, scary stuff, supposedly.
So, this originally was going to be directed by Martin Scorsese. He perhaps wisely chose not to. He's listed as an executive producer. Thelma Schoonmaker is listed as something to do with editorial. She didn't edit it, but she was involved with it. His editor, Oscar-winning editor of Raging Bull, among many other things. So I saw those names. I knew very little going into this. I saw those names, and I saw the cast.
I'd heard terrific things about it.
Name, like, wow. And it starts off and it looks fabulous. This thing is, for the most part, shot really well. There's some CGI here and there that really took me out of the movie, where I'm like, you know, maybe you could put people outside when it's cold and we'd see their breath and not have this fake-looking stuff. I won't get into that. Val Kilmer is briefly in this movie. Let's talk about Val Kilmer for a second, shall we? He's not been well, necessarily, for a while. He's had health issues and all that. So he's in this, and he looks a lot older and a little frail. And the scene you see him, he's sitting across the table in a restaurant with somebody, and they cut to a shot from behind his head, and you hear some voice speak, and you realize, oh, it's supposed to be him, but I'm not sure if that's him. It's clearly dubbed. I don't know if it's him dubbed later, if it's somebody else. And then you cut to his face, and he speaks, and his lips in no way match what he's saying. And you're seeing this on a big screen, and it's a close-up, because nobody likes wide shots anymore. And I'm like, what are we? Is this a Godzilla movie? What's going on here? It tries to do a very complex tale of political intrigue and serial killing and interpersonal family things and all that. And I'm with it for a long time in the movie, and then ultimately you realize all of this other stuff doesn't matter. Like, there are false leads, but the way this film puts it together, you feel like, well, this should pay off, and it never does. So all this time is wasted on all this extraneous stuff that maybe made a lot more sense or had more weight in the book, but it didn't here. When it is revealed who the serial killer is. I didn't like that personally. Right. It's sort of it's in a way, I don't want to give anything away. It in a way ties to Harry Hole in a way that I'm just like, that's a little convenient. The murderer at times uses this like guillotine machine, which reminded me of the Dario Argento film Trauma, which was not very good. So at least this is better than Trauma, I think. But ultimately, I didn't like this, despite looking good and having a great cast. It wants to be like another Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I think, a very dark,
that's
Nordic,
what it felt like.
you know, police thriller. I wouldn't call this a horror movie, really, although it's very brutal and very gory and graphic at times with some of the murders. Ultimately, it was just not satisfying to me, unfortunately.
Yeah, there were also, it seems to be, we open with this horrible trauma that this young kid has. And so for me, it was like, well, he's the killer, and so the whole rest of the movie was like, okay, I'm seeing connections. Here's Fassbender's character, Harry.
Mr. Hole.
And he has family issues. Here's J.K. Simmons' character, and he has family relationship issues. Here's Val Kilmer and Fassbender's ex-wife, who is off with some other guy. All of these little bits and pieces that sort of seem to make sense. But you're right, you could have lost all of them. J.K. Simmons does an admirable job losing his Parker kind of American accent or something like that. But his subplot was completely unnecessary, I thought. Quite literally, I thought you could have lost that entire bit. Yeah, this, I went to it because I'd heard good things from just from talk, and what a great cast it was. I ended up sitting back watching the lovely photography and the lovely scenery.
It looked great on the big screen.
Because for the first half of the movie, there are so many little plants and everything that you're supposed to try to follow that I got lost. I leaned over to my 16-year-old son and said, "Can you follow this movie?" And he said he could, but I was both disinterested and almost lost. Picked it back up about halfway through, but it just didn't carry me through. I was really very disappointed in the word of mouth that said Snowman was good, because I thought it was a pretty low-level attempt at. You're exactly right. It felt very much to me like it wanted to be Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, and fell far, far short.
So you wouldn't say boo to this movie? On the street.
I wouldn't say boo. I wouldn't say it once. I wouldn't say it twice. Ha! He did it again. But I would to Medea's new Halloween movie, Boo 2, a Madea Halloween. You've heard it before, because her original one, her original one was also called Boo, a Madea Halloween. But this is Boo 2 because it's a sequel, and it also has Madea back with many of the same characters that you saw originally. But it does touch upon slightly new things, but there's a lot there that's kind of the same, because it's really what you want. You know, that's what sequels do, let's face it. That's what sequels do. If you have something that you like.
For the whole family to enjoy a festival of entertainment at our special Mother's Day show.
I feel like somebody should take me out and shoot me, because I find Tyler Perry to be really funny, and I've really grown to like the Madea movies, even though they're check your brain at the door.
These wouldn't keep being made and released if there wasn't an audience for them.
Well, right, but I'm not the only audience.
No,
so, I mean, they're making money.
You're the only one in this room. But
right, and he brings stuff out like every month or so. Oh, this is the latest one from Tyler Perry. He's a good actor. He was in some good stuff, and I find Madea to be a pretty funny character. And this is the same kind of things. Certainly similar to all the characters that we saw from the original Halloween movie. I'm assuming there have been so many Madea movies that I can't remember if some of the people with her are the recurring characters. I don't remember. But it's the same old stupid stuff. And that's basically all I can say. If you like the Madea movies, I think you're going to have fun, because I did. I enjoyed this, and I like them too. So.
Well, I need to question you on this film.
You can't go ahead.
I will. I'm not poo-pooing the fact that you like it. It's fine. Okay. It's cool. Make you happy. Was it very well attended when you saw it?
No, that's true. There were only about 6 other people.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just curious as to what the audience makeup was. Was it older folks, younger folks, a mix? These do
well.
A
couple of older folks, and then the rest were teens. Mm-hmm. The others were teens. But you know, it's sometimes Madea can be kind of scary and stuff, and you have to really have some fortitude. And you know, not just anybody can go to these things.
Really?
Yes.
Are you saying that it takes a certain type of machismo,
Well, there you
male
go.
or female?
He's
to
picking
do
up
this?
on my little.
Oh, I saw what
segue.
he was. I thought he was giving me a very strange answer. Then I saw what
No.
he was doing. So up next we have a film detailing the true-to-life adventures. Might be too flippant a word for it. The true-to-life trials and tribulations of a group of men who fought wildfires out west. Excuse me, saving lives and property of untold millions. I'm sorry, I get choked up when I talk about Medea films. What kind of person does it take to fight fire in a hell on earth? My friend, it takes only the brave. I didn't see it.
Okay.
I wanted to, though.
Again, I think this is very much, and this isn't a negative, but it's very much exactly what it looks like. It's what you see is what you get. This is an uplifting message film about the true bravery of firemen. I've always thought that police officers and firemen are like the most overlooked and underappreciated people, jobs that you can possibly do. Because talk about risking your lives all the time. This really gets it across. Some of the most stunning, spectacular fire sequences I've ever seen. Now, clearly, if you're looking closely, you'd ask how much of it was CG. I think like 95% of it was probably CG. And so if you're looking closely, that was a bit of a distraction. But, you know, if you're looking for a story, and again, based on a true story, if you're looking for a story about, you know, true bravery from regular people and overcoming stunning odds, at least in some respects overcoming them, not to give away anything. You know, this was quite good. It was very well made, good performances by everybody. I'm being somewhat tentative because we've seen this a million times. And so nothing new really. This happened to be one of the stories that we've seen a bunch of times, only it was set in a forest fire. And so Only the Brave was well done. I think it'll translate perfectly well. Not to the small screen. You really want, you know, a big, if you've got a big TV at home. But if you're really into it, I think you need to see this on a big screen because visually it was pretty stunning.
This is one of those films where I wish theaters would get into old-time gimmickry and just subtly
turn the heat up a little bit.
Just goose the thermostat a little.
Sure.
And like with Snowman, just turn it down. Actually, where I saw the Snowman, I'm glad I brought a sweatshirt because it was cold in there.
Really?
So it's like, hey, it's 4D. So these people are they're almost like superheroes, these guys.
They are in many respects. So moving on actually to home video, however you may end up picking it up. Have you heard this story before? This poor kid, teenager, struggling with schoolwork, and his aunt is really hot. That can be a real problem. No, his aunt's not ill or anything like that anymore. But this kid has trouble with homework and everything like that. Just being a kid. Being a teenager can be tough, especially when you've been bitten by a radioactive spider. But the great thing is you can wait until a party comes by when you're watching Spider-Man Homecoming.
What's the matter, afraid of a little old Bob?
Beware the Spider, the crawly, creepy critter game from Ideal.
Now that we've reviewed Justice League privately,
right, exactly,
based on a trailer.
All on ourselves.
So speaking of superhero movies,
yes,
this is the latest, hey, have you ever heard of Spider-Man movie?
At least we didn't have to sit through him being bitten by the radioactive spider.
No, they did.
Boom, we just move right into it.
And that's nice because we don't need to be reintroduced to any of these characters. Do it under the credits. So he's the youngest Spider-Man we've seen to date.
Yep.
He's the hippest, most non-nerdy Spider-Man we've seen to date. I didn't really care for this movie.
I didn't like this one either.
And it's not because they changed the story
I love
or anything.
Spider-Man.
I'm a big Spider-Man fan since I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of...
He's smarmy. This was appealing to the younger folks, and that's okay. It's a lot funnier.
And very light in tone.
Yeah, it's very light in tone. But that's not what I wanted. Spider-Man does that. If you're a big fan of Spider-Man, absolutely, that's one of the fun things. But one of the things that made Spider-Man the big appeal in the comic books that he was when Stan Lee created him in 1962 was that all the other superheroes in the world, they've got great powers and all that. Here's a guy who has trouble. And like I was trying to say, his aunt's really ill. He's got to pay rent. He's got all of these normal things. And so I don't want, since we were talking about the Justice League, I don't want the super dark, grim, Gotham City kind of evil superhero
the
thing.
Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
Yeah, but second time, that's one of the things I didn't like about the first Garfield.
The second Garfield was not bad.
Second Garfield, I even liked his Spider-Man more than Tobey Maguire's. I thought Tobey Maguire so epitomized Peter Parker. And so, granted, I'm bringing all of these things into this one.
Right.
I thought Holland did a good enough job, but he's kind of torpy and smarmy, and that's just a different take, I think, on this younger generation, comedic Spider-Man. Couple more things to say. I'll turn it over to you. I hate to say this, but I was disappointed and almost offended at what they did with the character in how politically correct this film was. Every single one of Peter's friends is of a different ethnicity or a different sex, and it's so PC that just jumped out at me. Oh, here's the Asian friend, here's the Hispanic friend, and even Michael Keaton, whom I think is probably the best thing about this. Partial scenery chewer as the Vulture, but we have loads of fun with him. The first time he meets him, he calls Pete Pedro. And so I just thought this was, it's going to make bazillions of dollars, which it did. I'm sure we're going to see more of them. We'll be able to see Holland maybe grow into the role a little bit more. But I was really disappointed in Spider-Man Homecoming.
My big disappointment, as always, came from the action. The first big action sequence we see, and you see a little of it in the trailer, is in like a little ATM vestibule in a bank. And it's all way overcut and way shaky, and you get glimpses of the fact that they're trying to convey really interesting fight choreography, but you can't see it.
Right.
And I'm like, then what is the point of any of this? That and Tony Stark plays a major role in this film. The big deal with this is that they were able to work out all the deals and everything so that Spider-Man is now part of the Marvel, the rest of the Marvel movies in the Avengers universe.
Right.
So there's all this Avengers-y stuff and Iron Man stuff, and I'm I didn't come to see those other guys.
Gives him a suit. Spider-Man is now basically a blue-suited Iron Man.
Right.
He's got a computer talking to him and all of this. I just was really disappointed in the whole thing.
I mean, at least
it's such a money-making machine.
I give it credit for only having one villain because every superhero movie tries to just pack too damn much into it. Okay. This was a bit leaner as far as that went. You had one villain, but then you had to have these other superhero and Avengers-y things in there, and I'm like, yeah, that's okay. So ultimately, I didn't like it, but I think it was relatively popular. So as I always feel with these, like with the previous Garfield first film, not the cat, the Andrew Garfield film, I didn't really like it, but I hope they make a better one next time.
Right.
And we are lining it up so that, see, we're righting the wrongs of having an actual American playing an American superhero. we have the British Batman. We have the no, actually we don't. We have an American Batman again.
Oh, we do.
For a while, we had a British Batman, a British Superman, British Spider-Man. We have to make sure we get the UK contingent in all the superhero movies. Speaking of pugilism, is it my turn?
It is.
I think it is. Woo! Speaking of fisticuffs. Here we have a film. This is actually in theaters as well as, it's on demand now, but I actually saw it in the theater last week, so it's still out there. Vince Vaughn stars in a film from the director of Bone Tomahawk, if you saw that, as a man with a troubled past who finds himself behind bars having to fight for his life in The Brawl in Cell Block 99.
Prison walls. Visit Jackson's Cell Block 7 Prison Museum inside a working penitentiary.
Okay, no bones. I love this movie.
Okay.
This is a bare-knuckle, brawling, badass,
looks like a great one for
barbaristic.
kids.
Oh, it is. Bring the whole Manson family to this one.
I don't think so.
This is a manly movie matinee that I had with this movie. This is eat some red meat and growl at the screen. So the deal here is Vince Vaughn is a guy who loses his job. He's a former boxer who winds up working for a drug dealer he had worked for in the past to make money because his girlfriend, wife is with child and they're financially not in a great place. He winds up going out on a job with these guys who are connected to another drug lord or something. Things go very wrong. He winds up in jail, and Udo Kier shows up. I'm not giving away too much here. Udo Kier shows up at the little telephone behind the glass and says, bad things are going to happen to your wife and unborn child unless you go into this other maximum security prison and take this guy out. At which point, Vince Vaughn, who is going to just keep his mouth shut and do his time and keep to himself, has to start literally cracking heads in order to get thrown into this dark, evil place, which is like, it's like a castle with a dungeon. It is crazy, run by Don Johnson. It's this maximum security hellhole. And the film becomes incredibly brutal. It's well shot. I mean, it's not very complicated in how it's shot. It's all like prison cells and things. Vince Vaughn is really good in a way you've never quite seen him before. He's very stoic, and he's a guy who has codes of honor despite the insane brutality and murder that he carries out and who he's working for.
Okay.
it was just a cold and efficient movie. I really liked this a lot.
You said this was violent so much so that it isn't even rated R.
This is not rated R. I actually listened to an interview with Vince Vaughn yesterday where he said it's not rated R, it's unrated. So this would easily be NC-17 for the gore. It is very brutal and gory at times. And I saw this in a theater, and there were like 3 or 4 other guys there, and, if I may, manly men in the theater, and including it was at the Alamo Draft House in Yonkers, so the server was coming and going. And there were moments where all of us were going, oh! Even the server would walk through and go, oh! It's really intense.
Is that right?
But also, it kind of makes you giggle because it's just, it's the good guy taking out the bad guys, although good and bad is a matter of degrees in this film.
Right.
And yeah, I really liked it a lot. Not for those with tender sensibilities or stomachs, but if you like good old-fashioned manly prison movies, and the action was so well done. Wide shots.
Okay.
Really, really good fight choreography, long takes that play out in wide shots. And apparently the director is a fan of, as I am, Jackie Chan and Buster Keaton, and he knows how it should be done. Thus, this is probably the best, if you want to call it an action movie, I've seen in a long, long time, because you can see what's going on.
Well, when I was watching that trailer, Buster Keaton was the first one that came to
Did
mind.
you? Jackie Chan. Because every time Vince Vaughn hits somebody, he goes, oh!
Yeah, exactly.
And then at one point in the movie, he goes, collarbone 3 times, head 13, I gotta hold my head.
I don't know about that.
So, and strangely, aside from like his wife, not a lot of girls in the film.
Really? That's unusual, because in this next one, it's primarily would be the case. Jada Pinkett Smith and Queen Latifah and a whole bunch of their friends decide to have get all the ladies together, and they're going to head down to Nolans and have a good time during all of those festivities. It really is exactly what you might think, given the name. It's a girls' trip. So it's exactly what you would expect, and for Gosh's sake, or whatever the case may be, since this is a family-rated film TV show, we've had enough of these for the guys. Hot tub. How many hot tub time machines are the women going to have to sit through in order for us to have to sit through one of these?
Well, that was crap too.
Yeah.
As I like to quote Chris Rock said in a stand-up special years ago, just because you can drive a car with your feet doesn't mean it should be done.
No.
Now, people will always say, well, whatever comedy where a woman takes a dump in a sink. Well, we've had a lot of movies where guys do this. And those were crap too. How about we just don't make crappy movies? It's like, the buddy cop movie genre is dead, but let's do it with women. And it'll be what? It'll be another stupid buddy cop movie. Now, I'm getting worked up over a movie I didn't see, so I'll shut up.
It's exactly what this was it's the women's turn to
be repulsive.
Have a night out and be repulsive and do horribly offensive things.
Because for me, I don't want to see anybody doing that, so I don't care if it's male, female, or chimp. Well, actually, if it was a chimp, I would want to see it.
Might be,
but these, I just look at it, I'm like, no, I don't want to see that.
Bonzo doing some bongos
that would be
or something. Okay. But yeah, so what you saw there is exactly multiplied by 10. Because
it's just dirty, gross.
It's longer than 20 minutes, though. But yeah, so it's just the women going out and doing everything that they can do, that we've seen the guys do before. It was very pretty. Visually, it was well shot and everything like that. I expected this to be a real dues payer, but I wasn't bored or offended. There've been a couple of movies that are clearly aimed at the women that so straightforwardly that there was nothing there for the guy, and so I felt like, boy, this is a real waste of my time. Didn't feel that much this way. Would I have chosen to go see it? No, this was kind of paying my dues for reviewing it. But I thought Girls Trip was perfectly acceptable. It's certainly not going to be something if the ladies want to go see this and drag you to it or make you sit there on the couch, it's not going to be a bad time.
Okay.
So there.
Speaking of murder, aren't we always on this program? Sooner or later, it all comes down to killing. Here's a film. It's on Netflix now, so you could stop. I mean, not that you're listening to me anyway, but you could turn me off right now, or you could turn me on, and you could watch this on Netflix. Thomas Jane stars in a film based on a Stephen King novella about a man and a son on the farm who decide they don't need the mom and wife so much around anymore, and do something bad to her so that nobody knows about her again.
Was this current?
No, actually, this takes place in 1922.
Seen tonight? UNIVAC Scientific, UNIVAC File Computer, UNIVAC Punched Card Computer.
Just in time for Halloween.
Yes, it seems to be.
It's not really Halloween-y. It's just it's a murder movie. The quickest way to describe this, if you know Poe, it's a lot like The Telltale Heart.
Okay.
It's Jane and his son decide that basically the gist of, if I can fill in the gaps of what I said before the clip, they live on a farm, they're making ends meet just barely. His wife is dissatisfied with that life, and she either has a lot of money or the land was hers. I don't quite recall.
Okay.
And she decides she wants she doesn't want to be there anymore, and she wants to move away. So the son and husband conspire to off her. So the rest of the movie is them trying to cover up what they did and try not to tell anybody what they did and not go crazy from the guilt of what they did. But it manifests itself with Thomas Jane's character, the father, in some hallucinations and weird things he's seeing and weird things that are happening, which is where I get the Telltale Heart vibe. There's some gore and gruesome stuff in this. There's a lot of rats. If you don't like rats, it's good or bad, depending on that. Thomas Jane he's probably a wonderful guy. But I often find that he's what my friends and I call a kiss of death in movies, in that if he's in it, the film will either not be good or not be financially successful. Now,
Right.
I love Boogie Nights, which he's in, and I liked The Mist a lot, the film, which he was in. But I guess he was on that show Hung on HBO or Showtime for a while, which did well. But for me, anyway, in this, he was not great in this. He has this thick Southern accent, and he talks the whole time with his teeth clenched shut, like he's got lockjaw or something.
Okay.
And at times that worked, and I'm like, wow, he's kind of like an old man of the earth. And at times I'm like, wow, he seems kind of silly. So this, I could see why this didn't go into theaters. I don't think there's not enough here to really hang on a theatrical film. There's not a lot to it. It just kind of goes over the course of the aftermath of this murder and then kind of ends. I wasn't terribly interested in it. It's well shot and edited. It's well executed, like the wife was. But I wouldn't. This was not like another Gerald's Game, which went straight to Netflix, and I thought was really good. 1922, I thought was ultimately kind of forgettable. I would say just watch A Telltale Heart instead.
Right.
Speaking of films that only I watch. This is one we're playing a little catch up on. This is everybody's favorite segment, and by everybody, I kind of mean me. This is the Arrow Video Corner. Oh, right in the Ghostbuster knuckle, which is not a euphemism. This is a film starring Joe D'Alessandro, which some people know from the movies such as Heat, the Andy Warhol, Paul Morrissey films of the 70s. He stars as a man who's a New York street thug who goes to Italy and works his way up the ladder of crime. He is socially and immorally the climber.
Climber is so easy and convenient. You can watch TV while you climb in the comfort of your own home.
What a cheery clip.
Yes.
So this is a movie I'd never heard of.
Okay.
And Arrow released it. And so if Arrow releases it, I'm always like, well, it's probably worth watching. It looks fantastic, gorgeously rendered on video. So gorgeous color for this old cheap action movie from like 74, 75, I think. And D'Alessandro, it's one of the rare, full-on starring roles for him. And you can watch the movie in Italian with subtitles or dubbed. And I've seen so many of these trashy Italian movies dubbed that I just chose to watch it that way. That works for me. Sometimes with people like D'Alessandro, you might get a better vocal performance out of the guy who dubbed him than him himself. It's not him dubbing himself. So yeah, this is social climber works his way up through the mob, hosing his bad guy friends and foes. At one point, he decides to assemble a team. So he gets like a boxer he knows to be like one of his enforcers, and he goes to a motocross track and hires a bunch of guys on dirt bikes who are motocross riders to like steal shipments and deliver the goods. And so there's like really fun motorcycle and car action chases in it. A lot of fisticuffs. The soundtrack is super badass, heavy fuzz guitar, saxophone stuff with vocals, which I love. If you like the Italian crime movies of the 70s like I do, this isn't necessarily one of the best ones, but to me these are like spaghetti westerns in that I love spaghetti westerns. I love the trappings of the spaghetti western. So generally, even a bad one is still kind of good for me. So I wouldn't say The Climber's a bad Euro action movie. I just think it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
You also see I wrote her name down so I wouldn't forget, Stefania Cassini, who was in a lot of Italian movies. She was in Suspiria, which is like one of my favorite movies, period. So when I see anybody from Suspiria in something else, I'm like, ooh, that was the girl that was in Suspiria.
Right.
So she plays his, put upon girlfriend. I've seen people online compare this movie to Scarface in a way. So if you think of the Michelle Pfeiffer character, just in terms of the guy who's a little nothing works himself up to be a big something, and it may not necessarily work out for him in the end. The disc, because it's Arrow, the transfer looks great. The soundtrack is as good as can be. There's only one extra on this, and it's a decently sized interview with Joe D'Alessandro, who now looks like a guy you'd see on a park bench somewhere feeding pigeons, which is really weird because if you know what he used to look like, the guy was like a god among men. He was in a lot of the, I said Paul Morrissey, he was in one of the Andy Warhol, Frankenstein, I think. And now just to see him as this old guy who's like, yeah, I dated her and I did this and I did that. And you're like, yes, you did, sir, and you've got a better life for it. So yeah, I thought The Climber was a lot of fun. Not top tier Euro action, but certainly for me a good time. For the price I paid.
Right.
Thank you, Arrow. That's out now. That's actually been out for a few weeks, and we just got behind on a few things. Since we have time, I also want to throw one more thing in.
Yes, I thought you did.
We don't have a clip for it or a graphic or anything like that, so nobody needs to leap into action. I had a little extra time this weekend, so while at the Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers, which is like my indoor, not in town, home away from home for theaters, boy, do I love it. So they were running the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel called Leatherface. Released just this last year. It's available on demand now. It has a really limited theatrical release. It's just a few theaters, but I'm glad I was able to see it in the theater because it was interesting. I hate prequels. I think they're unnecessary. They never really add to anything. They're just something somebody thought up as a clever way to find out how so-and-so got the scar or got the limp or whatever. This one starts off, Lily Taylor plays the mother of the Sawyer clan, and you can see sort of the home life of Leatherface, which is sort of, if you want to say, okay, yeah, this is connected to the '74 movie, you can sort of see the elements of that house before it was in quite the same amount of decay. And nasty things are going on. The young Leatherface gets taken away from the family and put into an asylum or reformatory for kids. And then you flash forward a decade, and he and some other inmates break out. And Stephen Dorff is a lawman whose daughter was killed by this family who's trying to track him down.
Okay.
So it really isn't like another Chainsaw Massacre movie. There's a lot of very gory, bloody violence. It has that sweaty Texas feel to it, sweaty, gritty feel in the sun. It's more like a Bonnie and Clyde kind of thing. It's this group of people on the run and the crimes they commit and will Dorff catch them or not. And it does do something I never saw coming. There is a twist toward the end, and I'm like, well, wow, that's interesting. But then after that, what happens, I'm like, I don't want to get into it because if you're going to watch this, it should come as a surprise.
Right.
But ultimately, how Leatherface becomes Leatherface seemed like a little too fast to me.
Okay.
And this will, we can't really talk about it, but if you want to send us a message at movies@CheshireTV.org, if you've seen the film, I'll be happy to talk to you about what I thought of that. But ultimately, it was well shot and well executed. I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time. I now have Movie Pass, so technically it didn't cost me anything. That probably made my opinion a little softer on it. Interesting to see on the big screen and very like squirmingly effective. There was somebody who was in the theater with me during one of the really brutal scenes, and they were actually rocking back and forth in their seat, so I think it worked for that guy. And what was interesting to me is when the credits rolled, all these, every name, and not a small amount of people worked on this, every name ended in OV, and like maybe about 5 or 10 ended in SKI. And I'm like, that's a lot of OVs working on this film.
Right.
I'm gonna guess it wasn't shot in Texas. And I waited, and of course, sure enough, it was shot in Bulgaria, which is interesting to me. I'm like, is it really cheaper to go to Bulgaria to shoot in what is just the woods and dusty back roads? But I guess if you want to hire that many people to work on your film and the labor is that much cheaper, it probably is cheaper to do it over there. I wouldn't have guessed it wasn't shot in Texas. But it was fun and interesting. So if you want a Halloween type of movie to watch that is brutal and interesting, you could do worse, certainly, than Leatherface. So that's all we have to discuss this week.
Yep.
Was there any other matters of note, old business you'd like to discuss?
Not for me.
Next week we have Jigsaw, perhaps?
Yeah, and
yet another sequel to Saw.
Suburbicon looks like a lot of fun.
Suburbicon looks really good.
Yeah.
And we thank our friends at the Latches Theater in Brattleboro, Vermont, for sponsoring us for our theatrical screenings. And we will see you next week. We will do a show next week. And at that point, I will be Mark.
And I will be Tom.
And we will be the Cinemaniacs.
Cinemaniacs.